In I Am Spartacus news, multiple people who are named David Sosa have asked the Supreme Court to overturn a decision that says it's fine for a police officer to arrest anyone who happens to be named David Sosa when the cops are seeking someone who is a specific David Sosa. So the cops have an arrest warrant or otherwise are pursuing a particular person. In this scenario, they know that the person is named David Sosa. And so they were looking for David Sosa. And the courts below have said, hey, is your name David Sosa? If so, the cops can arrest you on probable cause that you are the David Sosa they are looking for. But as will surprise absolutely no one, there is more than one person by that name. So it's like, wait a second, you can arrest any of us just by having the same name as that person? Doesn't that seem like a little bit problematic? So shouldn't we take another look at that? All right, let's take a little bit of a look at this case. Let's get started with this. Never mind being arrested because you fit the description, even though that, of course, has its own problems. In Texas, apparently it matters only how your name is spelled. I really hope they don't want anyone else by my name, because I'd like to not be arrested very much. If you share your name with a criminal suspect, the Court of Appeals has said you have no recourse if you're wrongly arrested and detained, even for multiple days. So they're looking for a guy, this guy or girl. They're looking for someone of a particular name. They find you. You happen to have the same name. This is apparently all they know. All they know is the same name. And they're like, yep, we can arrest you and we can detain you for multiple days merely because you share the name. John Smith over here is quaking in their boots. This decision is now being appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Contributing to the cause is the Institute of Justice and a whole bunch of people named David Sosa. So the Institute of Justice does wonderful work as in this domain. They're a great organization. And it's like, yep, I am David Sosa. No, I am David Sosa. No, I am David Sosa. We are all David Sosa. We are David Sosa. From the amicus brief that has been filed about why the Supreme Court should take this case is about the constitutionality of Florida police arresting and detaining David Sosa on a Texas warrant from 1992 for a man named David Sosa. So Texas in 1992 said, we'd like to arrest David Sosa. And this warrant is out there in the ether. And has been out there in the ether for 30 years. 30 years later, the Florida police are doing a roadside stop, I guess, and say this guy's name is David Sosa. They pop the name into a database and they're like, hey, David Sosa is wanted in Texas. So the Florida police arrest the guy on a 30-year-old warrant. To be clear, that is not David Sosa, who chairs the philosophy department at the University of Texas, nor is it New York-based songwriter David Sosa. It is also not David Sosa, who is a cardiologist in Albuquerque. None of these David Sosas who submit this brief are wanted in Texas either. 2 of them are from North Carolina, 2 from Los Angeles. 2 of the David Sosas have even been confused for each other before. There are apparently a lot of David Sosas in this country, 924 if not more. There's a lot of David Sosas. There's also a lot of John Smiths. And I know that there are people who share my name as well, because I occasionally get confused by them as people send me emails that are intended for other people by my same name. My name isn't extremely common, but there's a couple of us floating around, including another lawyer who shares my name in Maryland. And it's fun when I get his email because that's attorney-client privileged. So that's just exciting and fun. So all good times. Anyways, only one of these David Sosas, but who knows which, is suspected of selling crack cocaine in Harris County, Texas in 1990. Yet apparently now every David Sosa faces up to 3 days in jail without any recourse anytime the Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, or any other state in which these David Sosas happen to be at that particular moment run a warrant check. 10 of 11 judges on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which governs appeals coming out of Florida, ruled that this petitioner, also David Sosa, has no legal recourse for the police wrongfully arresting him twice based on the same blatant mistake of personhood. So he's like, well, how do I prevent this from happening in the future? Once is an insult, twice is a problem. How do I prevent myself from being arrested over and over again? As David Sosa, I'm not David Sosa. Can I not be arrested anymore? I'd like to not be arrested very much. 7 of the justices went further and ruled that state officials do not even violate the Constitution if they hold an innocent person in jail for 3 days simply because they share a name with someone else in the country who often happens to have the same warrant. Yeah. So, any of you guys who share your name with literally anyone can now be arrested based on any of them having the same name as you. So that's exciting and fun. The decision blessed officer inattentiveness. It gives law enforcement a free pass for failing to do their basic job. It's the wrong call from the 11th Circuit and is a violation of rights. So they want the Supreme Court to take a look at it. I kind of hope the Supreme Court does take a look at it because this sounds problematic. If not for David Sosa, then for me. I don't know if anyone else by my name is a criminal, but I'd like to not find out. I don't know that any of you who have perhaps more common names, want to find out, or any of you guys named Heather or like John or anything like that, that you might be confused for someone else. Yeah. It should have been obvious to both the arresting officers and the court below that they cannot jail an innocent person for 3 days before they verify the identity. The 11th Circuit cited one of its own decisions in support of its decision. That case had involved a pair of brothers. Leonard McCollin forged a license to pose as his brother, Lenny, and Lenny isn't a great name. Who names their kid Lenny? Leonard's fine, but Lenny? Okay. Lenny ended up being arrested for his brother's crime, but it took a while to sort this out due to the forged license, and the arrest occurred during a 3-day weekend. The arrest also happened pre-internet, so verification would be much slower than it is today. So, the police, what they can do, in a time when people don't travel as far and there isn't as much travel, then the facts would be a little bit different. But now with today, with the internet and everything, the ability to verify this should be faster. The 11th Circuit looked at all the facts and decided that there's a 3-day grace period on rights violations. The Institute of Justice and the affected Sosas point out how ridiculous this is. By contrast, respondents arrested a random David Sosa just because someone else with the name was wanted in another state decades prior. The two Sosas are different ages, different heights, different weights, different social security numbers, different tattoos, and different states of residence. A warrant that described the wanted Sosa with particularity should have given officers enough information to determine that Sosa they pulled over was not wanted in Texas. And if the warrant's description was not particular enough, it can't be constitutional anyway, because you have to describe the person or places to be seized with particularity. That's part of the Constitution. Like what is the person or place you wish to seize them? It's like, I wish to seize, the crack cocaine. I'm going to find at 123 Fake Street. Great. Thank you for telling us what you're looking for, specifically what you're looking for and where. That was very helpful. I want David Sosa. Okay. Could you give us a little bit more? No. Okay. That's a problem. Not particular enough. Also, David Sosa may not be going by David Sosa these days. So if he's still alive. So there's that. Whatever the merits of excusing police from their duties over holiday weekend, the respondents arrested and detained Sosa during the work week. All information response needed was right there at their fingertips, especially since they had already made this mistake once before. How many times will it occur? Apparently, as long as you live in Florida, I guess. This is just the Fourth Amendment violation. Then, of course, there's due process. All that's tied together by the facts of this particular case, facts a reasonable person would understand to be violations of wrongfully arrested rights. Unfortunately, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals managed to talk itself into excusing this because it only deprived Sosa of 3 days of freedom. But did it? Did it deprive him? Because how often will this occur in the future? Any interpretation of the Constitution that concludes respondents' conduct was okay because they only took 3 days this time to determine they imprisoned the wrong person should be discarded. No sound constitutional principle permits the government to violate someone's fundamental rights for 3 days, but not 4. While the duration of injury can affect remedy, it does not eliminate the underlying right. Yeah, I mean, the more that they take away from you, the more your remedy should be. But, any deprivation should be illegal. If you steal $1 from someone, it's still illegal. It's not legal just because it's $1 as opposed to $1 million. It's illegal to steal $1 too. That 7 judges of the 11th Circuit misunderstood this confirms the need for grant. The Supreme Court in the Rodriguez decision made clear that it is not the duration of rights violated, it's the right itself. They sure did. They sure did. They said that in Rodriguez. That's right. Yeah, the duration might affect the remedy, but doesn't affect the fact that it was underlyingly wrong. If the government screws you over, or anyone screws you over for that matter, there's a remedy. How much you were screwed over goes to the redress, not the injury. Thus, that brings us to the end of the case of David Sosa, who is Spartacus, and you might be Spartacus too and not even know it. Because under this rationale, anyone who shares your name, who has done a bad, you might be arrested for the bad. Does literally anyone share your name anywhere in the United States who's ever done a bad and still wanted? I'm going to guess the answer is yes. Unless you have like the most rare name ever, I'm going to guess the answer is yes. Someone sharing your name has probably done a bad somewhere along the line. So it might be important to be able to differentiate one from the other. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals is over here like, nah, name is enough. You never mind description, age, weights, heights, tattoos, any of that stuff, just name. And the Institute of Justice is over here like, that doesn't make any sense, and has asked the Supreme Court for certiorari. So I think the Supreme Court might want to take a look at this. So we'll see if they decide to take it, at least for a moment. That brings us to the end of the discussion of this case.